Hello everyone, welcome along to Talking Sport, a weekly webinar created by 11 Sports in partnership with World Football Summit. Every Thursday we're bringing together leading figures from across the industry to share insights and expertise on the fight back from COVID-19. We made a superb start on this new series last week. We're confident today we'll continue in that vein as we debate and discuss how the industry will respond to the unprecedented events of this year so far. I'm David Garrido, for those who don't know me. I'm World Football Summit's main event MC, and with sports slowly but surely returning under vastly different circumstances compared to when it was halted, well, the one thing this pandemic has at least given us is time to reflect and maybe strategize for the future. So today's webinar is entitled A Pivot to Digital, Enhancing Fan Engagement Strategies in Sports and eSports. Arguably, the fan is the most important stakeholder that we have. In recent months, they've been served up watch-alongs, they've relived classic matches, they've watched countless player interviews on Zoom, while seeing a variety of stars attempting tricks with toilet rolls and tea bags and the like on social media. The only way they can actually be inside a stadium right now is to buy a cardboard cutout of themselves for their seat if they are a Borussia Mönchengladbach fan. But as sport returns, whether fans are present or not, ultimately, it's become even more important for them to still connect with their favourite teams and players. So how can the viewing experience be further tailored and personalised for them? How can they integrate elements of social media, augmented reality, virtual reality, betting? How can we, as Facebook's Peter Hutton put it last week, take fans down the free funnel and on a transactional journey? It's not just brazen upselling if it is compelling content. What can we learn from athletes and creators? What about different subscription models? How do you hook in the elusive Generation Z, the cord nevers, who aren't used to paying? Well, this afternoon we have a trio of top speakers who will explore this topic in depth for us. They are Pedro Presa, who is the CEO of Mycujoo, Victor Knaap, who is the CEO of Monks, and Robbie Douek, who is the CEO of Blast. And we're also delighted to welcome this afternoon as our moderator, Michael Broughton, a leading sports digital exec, most recently at FIFA. Guys, we really appreciate your attendance. Thank you so much for joining us. We welcome your interaction too amongst our audience, especially your questions in the questions tab on the right of the screen. You can upvote them there as well. Plus, we have polls for you to get involved with over the next hour. And the first one is already live, and it asks the following: will the COVID crisis cause a change in budget allocation for your organization for digital? Your options are increase, stay the same, or decrease. Already people are getting involved. Make sure that you register your vote. I will update you a bit later on that and the other polls that follow it. Plenty to look forward to then and enjoy. I will leave you in the capable hands of Michael Broughton. Michael, plenty to discuss. Over to you.
Thank you very much, David, and also obviously to 11 and the World Football Summit for hosting us today. We will jump into it straight away. Obviously, fan engagement and digital are nothing new. These are things that we've been discussing on panels and forums for at least a generation now, thankfully. One thing, though, that I was reading recently, Matthew Syed's wonderful book, Black Box Thinking, and what he said was, and I thought this was quite illuminating, that you only have innovation and adoption once you've had failure or frustration, right? So to me, that begs the question, has the COVID-19 crisis created that moment, whatever you want to call it, frustration, failure, whatever you want to call it, that moment to inspire us, be the catalyst to the next stage in our digital era and how we engage with fans? So at this point, I'm going to go around the panelists so they can all introduce themselves, and then I'll open up the questioning. But Pedro, introduce yourself and Mycujoo.
Hey guys, thank you very much first to 11 and WFS for the invitation, and hi to everybody listening to us today. So I'm Pedro Presa, I'm the co-founder of Mycujoo.tv. Co-founded it with my twin brother actually, 2014, currently running the company as the CEO. At Mycujoo.tv, we are a tech company that serves a platform and most recently its technology as well, and puts it at service of entities across the world. Mycujoo.tv as a platform for is soccer-centric, basically, fully focused on enabling within the same environment streaming solution, both on demand and live, plus a lot of add-ons that enable experience and data collection. So then we can empower small and medium-sized leagues, clubs, federations across the world to reach their fans and monetize the content. But most recently, we launched the Mycujoo Live Services that empowers as well the same technology we have in the platform to be scaled across all industries. at the same level, basically enabling tools that scale content creation, user-generated content, and monetization opportunities for everyone that is interested, basically, in a controlled environment.
Thank you. And Victor, tell us about yourself and Media Monks and what you've been up to.
Hi, hello. Thanks for having me as well. Yeah, what Media Monks does, I'm the CEO of Media Monks, and we are a content production, creative digital agency or content production firm. We're independent, so we're a platform agnostic. So, and we work predominantly to combine brands with entertainment on technical platforms like, or media platforms like Google, Facebook, Amazon, Adobe, etc., etc. So we try to make the combination between tech, reach, and creative idea. And I think I'm invited because we do a lot of things around football. If it's players or clubs or fans or so yeah, but especially from the brand perspective.
Okay, fascinating. Robbie, over to you.
Thanks. Yeah, so Robbie, CEO of Blaster, a global esports entertainment network, and we operate esports tournaments and leagues around the world in Counter-Strike and in Dota. I suppose maybe I was invited because maybe we should get into FIFA at one point in time. But obviously a very interesting moment to be involved in esports, large-scale arenas filled with tens of thousands of people, and then amazing online events with viewership in their millions. We'll probably get into more of that as the session continues. So pleasure to be here.
Great. Well, great to have you all three. Thank you very much. Victor, I'm going to come to you first. And I think you obviously you're a content platform, as you say, marrying up with technology. For me, a key one here is, what is the fan going to be expecting going forward? I think, we've seen maybe a shift of balance in recent weeks and months. And do you think sport is ready for the fact that the audience, the fans, are now as much content producers as they have been content consumers?
Wow, I feel like there's three questions hidden in one. Let's start with your overall remark that you made in the beginning. We see a big, so yeah, there's years that nothing happens and there's weeks that everything changes, and we are definitely in weeks that everything changes. So the digital transformation from a brand perspective is like, if there are plans on the table to go into e-com, then now that plans are executed within 2 weeks instead of talking about it for 2 years. So the need to change is really fast. And it is one from a brand perspective, if you cannot sell your products into shops anymore, so you have to shift online. And the same thing happens with audiences. So I think especially the different generations that we need to talk to with entertainment are suddenly behaving similar. So my mother's age starts to look at content. I do hangouts with her to have dinner. That was unheard of 10 weeks ago. So that change means that content consumers change on where they watch content, and that content production is not only coming from the big networks, but indeed going from big networks to influencers to people at home. So, and also with all this technology and media change, also the tonality of how do you speak to people change. So how do you say things change at this moment? Where you need to do things change at the moment, and the user behavior change. So that it is a period of radical change. And I think the problem that especially the football has is that these rights are everywhere. So it's super difficult for a content producer to do a multi-platform strategy like this, the same story or the same kind of story. How do you get that to different countries, to different audiences on different platforms, if the rights are stuck at national level, player level, brand level, and club level? So that's the difficulty of it. I don't have a one-size-fits-all solution for it, but that limits the ability to change faster.
Okay, I mean, I actually, Robbie, I'm picking up on that. I'm going to come to you to follow that up a bit. Have you seen it changing as rapidly in the esports world because there's been suddenly an influx towards you during this last few weeks?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I mean, COVID's been a challenge for, all the sporting organizations around the world. And so, I mean, really what springs to mind is sort of creativity, flexibility, and technology. There's sort of three pillars that work here. And, the phone really has been ringing off the hook, right? Because, multiple traditional sporting franchises want to engage with esports to have digital output. The traditional esports and core esports titles are wanting to get more online and more live. And then even consumer-facing brands are trying to engage in esports. They're trying to occupy some of that noise that's in the ecosystem currently. But why I said sort of creativity, flexibility, and technology is because, the ones that are going to win through on this, and this is sort of a rebirth of how it might end up happening in the future, are the ones that are going to be able to produce fast and smooth and clean and really cleverly. And I think really sort of drilling that down into some detail, what I think sort of traditional sport will be able to learn from this experience is that if they're more flexible, if they engage technology more, then they're going to win through. We've had hundreds of hours of live broadcast over the last couple of months. We've had to do radical things to our broadcast to make that happen. We've got, external IP feeds from, hundreds of different places when traditional sports has that from multiple places. So I think what's going to change here is that if traditional sports starts embracing technology and the broadcast, I'm obsessed with the broadcast and I'll keep banging on about it during this webinar, in the right way, I think we'll see a big shift and a big turn in how things will change in the future.
Okay. I mean, Pedro, the two, they've both mentioned now, obviously, the rights holders and so on, and you've made your living to date by exploiting the long tail of content, whether that's second, third, fourth tier rights, national rights, women's football, and so on your platform. How have you found the rights holders, how they've adapted to you, and how is that brought into your thinking for launching the live services platform you've done for the general public?
Thank you, Michael. I agree with what Robbie just said. I think it's time for rights holders to embrace, especially sports rights holders, to embrace the digitalization aspects and to focus and adapt as well to how this to different types of contents and how they're being produced. At Mycujoo, we've proven that it's not only about the super high quality broadcast, but as well about the authenticity and the easiness of bringing the content to fans. Is it from a mobile phone, from a multi-camera production, but be able to basically broadcast and distribute it and be present where the user is. Obviously, with the COVID-19 crisis, at this point in time, we all know the impact it's had in the industry. And we felt an increasing amount of companies reaching out to us, from media companies to platforms, but as well to federations and clubs outside of football as well, that wanted to license the technology of Mycujoo. So basically enabling the services we have in their own environments in order to serve their communities to create more content. So we really felt that this impact had a positive change in the industry, at least in the early months, and it's proving to continue. So in a matter of 2 months, we basically decided to work on the product based on the technology that we developed for 5 years, which is proprietary, which basically is enabling now, initially in a better environment that is already in its full capacity, creators around the world to basically have the same technology we have within distinct environments, because we really believe, again, that the content and the distribution of content needs to be wherever the user is, and we really felt the need to adapt that. So we really believe that sports need to go more into the form of user-generated content, because this power of authenticity and scalability is what will make the difference in the months to come, especially when you have multiple sports organizations that will have to deliver content, but will have no ways of having people in the stadiums, right? And so what we felt was that there was a time now to make sure that we would enable this technology in means that we could empower a more sustainable economy as well around content creation. So organizations using the Mycujoo Live services now will have access to data that in using other platforms they would not have, which will enable them to understand their audience and the people creating content with them. If you compare, for instance, with other social media platforms or other platforms even, which in turn means that these organizations can now start creating more authentic and engaging experiences. And we could learn a lot from this within eSports, which are much far ahead when it comes to this. But when it comes to the platform, just to be really brief, we as well enabled the Mycujoo.tv platform to many partners out there during the crisis, empowering them to reach audiences across the world. We worked namely with the Tajikistan Premier League or with the Belarus League, providing embedding solutions across big media companies such as Marca in Spain, enabling new monetization opportunities through sub-licensing or AV and data for betting distributor, for example. But on top, we work with the small organizations like clubs and leagues to do training sessions within a closed environment to their own players. So there's multiple ways that content can be meaningful, and it doesn't need to be in a broadband, but it could be as well in a closed circle.
So thank you, Pedro. I think I'd like to keep encouraging everybody. I see lots of chat going on the platform, and thank you, everybody. We have some interesting questions coming through, and please keep coming up with them. Something that has come up, quite a few people are enjoying, is this one here. So Nicholas has raised, can you tell us some innovations that have arisen due to the actual situation around fan engagement broadcasting? I mean, gentlemen, I'll start with you, Victor. Are there any specific things that you've seen coming out that have emerged that you think you've seen companies or that you've been recommending, saying, look, try this?
There's in general, there are three things that we see that had a certain shift in the last couple of weeks. And the first one is the re-edits of the messaging. So I completely agree with the other two speakers on you need to create or the distribution is going to be super important. But when I look at it from a creative perspective, then you also need to create something that fits on that platform. Like traditionally, if we look at films or live entertainment, where everything was broadcast centered. So that means big screen first, linear, and a passive consumer that sits back and relax and looks at the entertainment. That's completely different than you have to produce something for this. So the first immediate response is we scale down our content. What needs to happen is that you need to create something that is specifically fit for format, that not only fits that screen, so you don't have that weird black boxes around it, but it's actually doing something with the user behavior on that screen. We have been tortured for years with content that doesn't fit this screen. And that you see a big turnaround there. And every designer knows you start designing on the smaller screen first. If you start a new business, start with your business card. Everything else is easier. Bigger screen, more room to tell your story. So we see a big shift in that. So really small screen first and really do something with that medium. Secondly, re-editing of messages. Like I already see things now online where there's a lot of people together that wears me out. So this 10 weeks also had a mind shift on how we perceive content. I'm like, why are there all these people so close together? It's like my brain already doesn't want to see that. So there needs to be a shift in the way how we tell stories and the tonality of it. And last but not least, I think one of the biggest opportunities at this moment is trade shows and how things are being normally sold in, or large stage events like this was, or trade shows where people promote complex products, where people need to go into a trade exhibition show. So how do you translate that into a digital environment that's not boring?
Yeah,
So those are the three things that I see.
Robbie, I mean, I think the esports world has been, I think, at the cutting edge of, say, that kind of engagement and gamification, how we engage with the consumer live during a show. Actually, 11, our partner here, are getting nominated for awards for their Watch Together product that they've been having with React to. Something that Victor said earlier about how, like him, I'm having dinner parties with my parents and grandparents over Zoom. Wouldn't have happened. But when it comes to the live broadcast, we currently put out a single feed, right? So how do you cater towards, in say a family like mine, my father who has a lean back experience on a big screen, myself, I'm somewhere in the middle, I'm on WhatsApp, I'm on Twitter, to my son who is fully into the kind of Twitchification, as one of the questions is phrased it. How do we cater for this? What is esports doing? What can we in more regular sports kind of learn from how you're approaching the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're not necessarily even finally there. I mean, as I said before, I'm obsessed with the broadcast, and I'm obsessed with the notion that today, even if I'm watching esports, I'm still watching esports in the same way that I watched it potentially 5 years ago. I'm still watching football, certainly in the same way I watched football 30 years ago, right? Which makes very little sense considering that we've got so much technology at our disposal, right? So I think fundamentally that's going to have to shift. And where I think this is an interesting question is there a way of segmenting that content for different genres, different populations, for different age demographics? So that, for example, if your mother, your father, or a different age group is watching esports, that the content and the output that they're getting is very different to than if a 15-year-old's watching it. I'm actually struck by what happens if someone watching esports is watching it currently on YouTube or Twitch or any of the platforms. There's this endless chat going on, right? And just a bunch of people piling in on this chat. I don't really think that serves any purpose, to be quite honest with you. And ultimately, I think that needs to probably change. But what it's saying is that the consumer wants more. The consumer wants to lean in. He wants to engage. He wants to interact with that product. And so I think fundamentally, that's where the industry is going to change. I think esports at the cutting edge of that. I mentioned this earlier. I mean, we've got things like our Obi trucks, right, to be able to distribute our content, are equipped with like Discord links and stuff like that. I mean, that's a radical game changer. We've got teams in remote locations. I mean, we're live on Monday. We've got teams in 26 different locations. So you can imagine the amount of IP feeds we're trying to ingest into our product. So I think football can learn a lot from that. And I think, maybe this is a bit, out there, but I mean, if you look at how much has been, how much involvement have we had in the traditional sports industry since COVID, we haven't had enough. We love football. We love cricket. We love tennis. We love sport. We want to know about these players. We want to know about these teams. And yet the clubs and the players aren't giving us enough of our fix. And then we need more. And actually, technology was there. Technology was available for them to do that. And so esports took advantage of that. And yeah, we've been inundated with broadcasters phoning us up for content because there isn't anyone else providing it. We're in the right place at the right time is really the answer.
It's always a good place to be.
I'm not going to complain.
A lot of what you've been talking about there, I think, to me, the underpinning of all that is data, right? To understand where they are, what they're doing, how they're interacting, why are they asking those questions? How do we understand this? To me, the foundation for digital, and this is a conversation I've had 1,000 times, comes back to what is the data? Can we make sense of it? And where do we go? Pedro, with your platform and what you've been doing, how have you viewed data? And in particular, not just on how you bring an audience to long tail content, which traditionally has been hard to bring people to, but then how do you monetize it? Because I'll probably ask Victor about sponsors in a minute, but they're going to want to see a return, right? So how do you do that? How are you viewing the question? Before you answer that, I think I should say we're about to put our second poll up. I'm delighted to see that 64% of you say that there will be an increase in your budget around digital. These guys are here to take your money, so call them anytime. Feel free. Pedro, sorry, keep going.
Thank you, Michael. It's a very good question, but I will work a little bit on it. In Mycujoo, and as I'm sure in most of the tech companies, data is key. Each of the teams that work in the organization have to deliver data in a certain way. Just an example, we work with cache data versus search engine versus big data, for example, and we have a diverse set of data stores throughout the platform. And then we have each team working on their own, which work on these data stores independently, right? And then all data, obviously, business data, behavioral data, analytical data, is exposed to a single system, which we work with Kafka, and then we basically use this data to basically take all the decisions in the company, including monetization, right? So we collect data from one of the most important data collections that we do is from the ingestion of the stream. And every ingestion that we're getting, it's being consumed by a single user, and we can identify each of these single user data. And so by leveraging this data, we're monitoring the stream, and we can monitor the quality, the uptime, the services, but as well, we work independently to serve it through a messaging system where the data flows, collects more data in order to understand how we can monetize this consumer, okay? So just as an example, we've been testing out notification systems in the platform. And this is very interesting because we, at this period in time, there's no content live whatsoever. And most of the fans out there, they cannot follow their clubs anymore, but we still had the Tajikistan League going forward. So we were basically sending notifications and trying to understand how fans from all over the world that would never follow these leagues would interact with this specific content. And we could see an increase of around 10% in content consumption compared to the people that did not receive notifications. So we really feel that the appetite for football is there, and those stories that are still to be discovered is something to keep learning from. Another example is how we work with that around content and in order to monetize it. So we basically have a streaming platform that serves the content in 0 to 2 seconds. And then with the latency with a 4G connection. So if you're streaming with a 4G connection, we can serve this content raw in 0 to 2 seconds. Then we can work on it and serve it to the end consumer with multiple qualities with 15 seconds max, and then DVR timelines, etc. There are two ways we work with this that our products that we're monetizing have been very successful. So point number one is that we enable content creators to create highlights, and this enables them to serve these highlights in a DVR timeline that are then filtered in individual profiles. And then we created a product called the Mycujoo catalog. We currently have millions of highlights that are targeted through the multiple entities to an individual player that belongs to a club, league, and federation, and then this catalog is being sold. On another level, by serving the stream in 0 to 2 seconds, we're enabling data brokers to tap into our APIs and receive the stream in 0 to 2 seconds, and then they can use their own data collections services, so then they use in their own benefits for the multiple reasons. And then I can go on and on to explain the multiple business models that we're working around this, but obviously sponsorship, advertising, the level of information we can get and give the information that the sponsor needs in terms of engaging time, which specific user they want to address and with which specific message, but as well understanding which contents are more susceptible for subscription or pay-per-view. Basically, I'm not saying something new. Data is key. It's fundamental, and in Mycujoo we operate 100% with what we receive, basically.
Great. So the second poll is live. We're asking now, please go and take a vote. Which is the most important content creator in modern sports? The rights holder, the athlete, which if any of you have been watching The Last Dance, might tilt you one way, or the fan. Love to hear your thoughts. Victor, picking up on some of what Pedro said, one of the things I took away from that is obviously using data to attract in sponsors, but also about personalization. In 2008, I was at a panel not dissimilar where the chairman of British Airways was asked, during the crisis then, a purely financial one, are you going to pull out of your London 2012 Olympic sponsorship? And he was categorical, like, absolutely not. Right now is when you need to double down on your brand and say, no, we stand for something, we're going forward without doubt. How are you working with sponsors, or how are sponsors working with you to say, look, sport is still important to our mix, but, how do we do this? How do we make it more relevant? How do we adapt to COVID so that we don't look like we're tone deaf? And you referred to tonality earlier. So really interested to see how sponsors are reacting to this and how they're engaging. Good.
First of all, I think that that is going to be a tough time. Let's be honest. Media budgets overall dropped with 50%, and I don't see that coming back in Q3 as well. And it depends a little bit on what brand when it returns back. So the whole world is talking about, like, do we have a V-shaped recovery in our economy or a U-shaped, so it will take a little bit longer, or it's an L-shaped recovery? What we've done as Media Monks is, as we looked at our client brackets, if a brand is V-shaped, U-shaped, or L-shaped. And based on that, you have to make the decision what you're going to do. To be honest, an X amount of sponsors and brands that are now deeply involved with football will not come back. They will not survive this. There's an X amount of brands that will not come back within the next year. So I think this is going to be a major reset for sponsoring. L-shaped also gives, and V-shaped is like you can have everything in place, you can do whatever you want, you just have to hold your belly, lean into governmental support for 2 months, and everything will be back to normal. That's just a third of all the brands that is out there. Some of the brands will have long-lasting issues. So I think that besides brands want to be more relevant, besides brands want to act like a helping hand instead of the buy this message, that we're going to have a hard time. And the discussion that you just had between, I still need to build my brand, I totally agree with that. But it needs to be relevant. So the relevancy needs to go up. So I think the football industry needs to think about what kind of relevancy they can add to the society, which we all think. I think entertainment is one of the most important things to get through this. Look at the numbers of Netflix and Disney Plus. So there's a big need for people to get entertained, because we are now in a 10th week of the lockdown, and otherwise we will turn crazy. So I think the industry needs to start convincing brands that football is not a luxury, that it's part of life and keeps us sane, and that kind of stuff. But that has massive impact, because you already see the push down on football players who make too much money during time. Like social pressure is getting extremely important. So finding the right message in this time, why you as a brand are involved in soccer sponsoring, is going to be super important. Because some of the sponsoring is just because the contract is signed, and you cannot bail from that. But the relevancy is going to be, why should you do that? And I think that message needs to come from clubs, needs to come from players, and needs to come from the whole industry. If you lose that, you will have a setback that is more than 50%. Because if you don't fix that, then football is placed in the luxury spend of a brand and will have a branding backlash. So finding that message, and I haven't seen anyone talking about that that relevance of football in society and people's lives. And that's why a brand needs to be connected with it. I haven't seen any case of that. And if that doesn't happen, I'm really worried that the whole business model underneath football will be disrupted.
I mean, if I could jump into that as well, I think fundamentally, I think what we've seen with COVID is a massive change in the value chain, right? I think that value chain is going to be completely shifted going forwards, and who knows if huge broadcasters are going to pay huge rights fees going forwards, and what return they're going to expect from it, what guarantees are they going to expect from it. Are they going to be able to service their advertisers with those broadcast rights? Are they as valuable as they were prior? So all of these are sorts of questions that we ask ourselves, but at the same time, I think what we're saying here is absolutely bang on the money. Can we add value? Can these brands add value for their audiences? And if they can add value, and if they can get those audiences engaged in the advertising, the product, the output of the content ultimately, then it becomes valuable, and then it doesn't become a luxury. And I totally agree with that point, because if it becomes a luxury, we're going to knock billions off of the sports economy, which I think is worth 500 billion globally, and that is a huge risk. But it's going to take time to come back, and the ones that are going to win are the ones that are going to be able to provide solutions which are smarter. And fundamentally, if I look at our business, I look at our broadcast rights revenue for this year, it's in a good place. We'll probably over deliver because we've been given a huge amount of impetus because of COVID, because multiple broadcasters want more, right? But sponsorship and traditional sponsorship is not as easy, right? You can't just go out and sell a traditional sponsorship in the same way. And a football club isn't going to get the same value for their shirt if they're going out to market now than they were, a year and a half ago. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I just think they're going to have to work way harder for their money. And I was talking before this call about where I'm listening for my podcast, and the Facebooks and the Googles of the world are taking a lot of that spend, and they'll carry on taking even more of that spend because it's scalable, it's trackable, and it's data driven.
One of the things that you both raised there, and I want to touch on, is so I've argued for a little while now that actually the name engagement is wrong, right? Because I think fan engagement as we currently see it, and the way we think of engagement, is like a share, some various metrics with varying levels of dependability. I like the word involvement, because when I went away and looked up the dictionary meaning of involvement compared to engagement, it talked about a two-way relationship. That actually, if you talk about fan involvement instead of fan engagement is, I've created the content, I'll send it out to you, and you'll like it, share it, comment on it, whatever it is. Whereas involvement is saying, actually, there's a deeper relationship here, that there is a two-way relationship, and you're going to be involved with me. I don't know what your take is on that, or even how you would bring that to life. But to me, if you need to strike a chord and show the relevance to the fan, the consumer who wants to be involved, yes, they want to watch the live content. But as you said, that stream on the right-hand side shows they want something more than just to watch. Are we, by talking about fan engagement, beating down almost the wrong path? An open question, which of you is willing enough to answer?
I mean, as a starter for TED, the notion of reward comes to mind, which is one of the oldest mechanisms in the advertising industry. The gaming industry has been spun by reward-based advertising for a long time. But I mean, potentially the notion of involvement, and I quite like that, I think it's true, it essentially predisposes the notion that you're leaning in rather than engagement, when even though the word is engaged, you're not actually engaging really with that content because of the way that we view our social media feed. So I think it's very doable. A nugget for you. I mean, one of our major sponsors is Betway. And the client was talking about how he saw in front of him someone on their phone in one of our stadiums, literally downloading the app in the live stadium and then placing a bet as he spoke. So clearly there was something with the content that engaged that user to do it, right? And it worked successfully for them. But we're going to have to work a lot harder to be smarter around that. And I don't have the golden nugget for you now, but I do think rewarding the fans for their involvement and getting them closer to the action. I'll go one stage further than that. If they can sort of own the action, that's even more compelling, right? So if the fan can actually almost own the community, own the action, own the pulpit, then potentially you've got an even more impressive product going forward.
Yeah, and if I can add something, and going back to what Robbie and Victor said, I think the involvement goes beyond the fan itself. I think the business model that traditional sports currently have needs to fundamentally change. Media budgets are going to be massively reduced. The involvement needs to be as well the way forward for the content rights holders, the leagues, the clubs, and the federations, because they need to be involved with their partners in order to work hard to monetize their content. And when this involvement starts at this level, then obviously the next step would be to involve the fans, because rights, the way we see nowadays, where the clubs, leagues, and the federations receive the money up front and they don't have to do anything else besides playing a game and sitting down, and then all the rights go to the media companies, then they're blocked from doing different types of engagement or involvement types of content with the users. But once they start getting involved as well in content creation, in ownership of rights, and in the ownership to monetize the specific content, I think we're one step closer to what you just said, Michael, and I fully agree with both of you.
Yeah, sorry, to add to that, and also the regional aspect to it, right? It is, I saw a stat that the last World Cup, there were 50% of visitors were in Russia that didn't have a club or a country that played in there. So then you can already see the mismatch between fans and regions. Like, I don't have to live in my region to be a fan of Ajax. It can be somebody in Egypt, or it can be somebody in Japan. And that metrics, so it's a very weird moment in time that's going to be speeded up by COVID. These couple of months are going to define how it works. But commercial, and I think players are further in that because they run their own social media and stuff like that, and direct brand relationship, direct fan relationship. Than clubs are.
So
the
Victor,
commercial teams of clubs need to be reorganized into have this weird matrix of people and fans that sit all over the world and that watch in big screens, small screens, delayed, live, everything.
Victor, you touched on something there that Pedro Pinto, and maybe you can pick this up, as raises the question for us. So Pedro has said, athletes have become the biggest influencers on the planet, still not quite sure how to monetize their content. The top 3, 4 obviously do very well with it. How can they improve this? Is this now their time to really demonstrate they perhaps have more relevance to the connection with the fan? What are your thoughts on what brands, what fans, and what athletes can be doing in this world?
Well, it's even further. I believe that around a player, there's girlfriends, boyfriends, family members, social media influencers, DJs, other kinds of celebrities. So it becomes a whole ecosystem of people around that have reach. So yeah, we're definitely looking into. We just invested in an influencer business. How to help connect brands to well, not athletes but influencers, but an athlete could be an influencer. So it is it's a super interesting given, and I truly believe that the value of a player, besides being a good player, is going to be how much social media he brings into to a new club.
I was thinking about this. I was talking to someone else about this. I used to be involved in influencer marketing in a prior career, and there was a lot of articles about how most of these influencers are not getting paid at the moment because there's no work for them, right? So And I think it's interesting. I think that brands will come back and spend quite heavily with influencers in the coming weeks and months. But I think also the definition of an influencer is probably going to change. I think that's going to enlarge massively. And I think that our friends and family could suddenly start becoming influencers in a way that they haven't been in the past. And that we'll suddenly see sort of worlds open and economies open in and around smaller groups of people influencing larger groups of people, because I think that's what this digitalization that's happened through COVID has made the world become. So I think there's a big opportunity in that. I think there's a big opportunity for sports athletes to do a better job of marketing themselves for certain. In my world in esports, some of them are fantastic and incredibly marketable. Some of them just don't want to know, and all they want to do is game. And there's not much you can do about that, because all they want to do is sit on the server, right? And they don't want to do media day, and they don't want to do press, and they don't want to do branded content. But the ones that do understand it do really engage very well with it, and they've got huge fan bases, huge viewership. So there's nothing wrong, no reason to stop it happening.
Well, we can't be all David Beckham, right?
No.
Yeah.
If I can add to that, exactly to what you just said, Victor and Robbie, I really believe that not only long-tail footballers can nowadays have the same role as an influencer than David Beckham, because with the amount of reach you can see in platforms like TikTok, where you have kids, 16-year-old kids with 20 million views in videos, it could work as well the other way around. Like we don't know if in the near future a match made in Bangladesh will have more viewers than Real Madrid Barcelona. Maybe I'm extrapolating this, but if there's a bunch of influencers playing in that game and the young kids really like the way they play and how fun it is, maybe this will have as much power or more power than premium content itself. And it's the authenticity, and esports is an example at that level as well. Like we really have the space and the distribution, the technology nowadays that could enable this. And this would be amazing for brands, for clubs, leagues. I could go on.
Maybe we should build a new team.
Let's do
the number of followers that you have.
I think you touched on
a commercial team.
I think if you look at least superficially, the success of a lot of the platforms on Twitch, how Fortnite is working, Microsoft obviously trying to steal some of the Twitch streamers and so on. Influencers clearly are playing a big part in this. And micro influencers almost as much as the David Beckhams of this world, right? So is that something? I think you go back to, was it Juventus buying Ronaldo was the first time that a club saw a decrease in the amount of followers having sold a player, right? Because the number of people following Ronaldo was so large that some of them stopped liking Real Madrid and just shifted to Juve. It was, I think, the first time we've actually seen that happen. At the same time, if you're not in the esports world, Robbie, I don't know of any stars other than one, right? So do we need to have this kind of crossover moment from esports world where more than a David Beckham or a Ninja, something happens where we're starting to see this kind of flip, and that might help bring more brands to your world?
I think we're too old. I think that's the problem.
Probably.
No, I mean, I reckon if we asked a group of 15-year-olds, they'd be able to name 20 of them, right?
Yeah.
We struggle because what we see is traditional sports stars basically coming into esports, right? And adapting to that, not the other way around. Well, although you have seen it, right? So Man City did a great piece with FaZe Clan, right? And FaZe Clan probably to most people prior to that was not very well known, and now is one of the biggest esports clubs and brands in esports in the world, and now is a big brand in that space. But I do think probably drawing more attention to those stars is going to happen primarily because they're just going to start appearing more and more in traditional media, right? Currently their ability to exploit themselves is essentially on Twitch or on YouTube, on digital streams, and most of the audiences that don't know who they are watching on linear. So that will shift. And I'll give you another example of that. I mean, in Denmark, we're a Danish business. I mean, there are a couple of esports teams which are huge. And the players can't walk down the streets without being recognized. And that is absolutely true. And so some of these guys are household names now. And you'll find that in other sports as well.
I think it's interesting for our second poll, where we asked who's the most important content creator, the rights holder, the athlete, or the fan. The athletes had 44%. So I think that's an interesting little thing out there about how important the athlete, the star is, and I think in gaming that you're probably right. I am too old and not engaged enough in the world, despite my time working on FIFA eSports. Really interesting. Our final question is out there. Which generation should we be focused on most? Now, for the last 10 years, everyone's talking about millennial. Now everyone's talking about Gen Z. I would argue we shouldn't yet forget about Gen X, me, or the boomer, because they have the money, they're willing to also spend, and they're not so digitally unaware as you think they might be. So interested on everybody of where they should be. Victor, to that point, obviously every brand is different. Every content creator is different. Every rights holder is different. But I imagine most people are picking up the phone to you saying, how do I connect with a Gen Z or millennial?
Yeah, we've seen that. So I do this for 20 years, and when we started, MTV was the most important brand that said we connect with the youth. So probably this group is we saw how we should dress and what songs we followed, and what artists we followed, etc. And now you have Vice and TikTok and so on. I truly believe, and yeah, there is differences in it in different target audiences, but I truly follow the Netflix model. So someone that's 50-year-olds in Japan could have more in common with a 25-year-old in LA than the neighbor that I lived there too, based on the audience segmentation. So Google and Netflix have a completely different audience segmentation. It's like, do you like extreme sports? Are you a fashion fan? Do you like movies, etc., etc.? So if you look at those audience data instead of age, then you will probably get a whole different persona out of it. So yeah, you can lean into, and you can also start guesstimating if people who are big soccer fans probably also like blah 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 blah. You can have those correlations, and or one-time soccer fans like that only watch the World Cup would probably have a different demographic than the diehard fans. So I'm way more a fan and a believer of a different set of audience segmentations than age. Although platforms, I do understand it's a matrix system. So yeah, there is differences in platforms, but that goes faster as well. Like if you saw from youth to old on Facebook, that took like, I don't know, 3 years or something like that. And see how fast that evolved on TikTok. TikTok is not for 16-year-olds anymore. So it just goes way faster.
Yeah. And what, right?
Yeah.
Go on, Pedro.
No, I fully agree with Victor. He said almost everything. I don't think it's about how you segment the content per generation, but it's about analyzing which type of content you are delivering to the user, and that could be across multiple ages. A fan of Ajax could be a 5-year-old and a 75-year-old, and they're as fanatic the same way. And Victor explained multiple times that the best way to do this is to basically organize the content and produce it and distribute it in the format that the consumer is actually receiving it, and making sure that you have different types of content being distributed. Because maybe an Ajax fan loves to watch the full 90 minutes. Maybe there's as well a fanatic Ajax fan that likes to watch the documentaries about Cruyff, but the brand is still the same, right? So it's more about the content and the consumer, but it's not who you're targeting with. If you can target everyone, but with different formats, different contents, with the same brands, I think that's the best way to do it.
So Robbie, I'm going to come to you next because you really want to focus on the broadcast, and we have an interesting question here from Luis Vicente. Do you believe COVID-19 will accelerate the chances of creating a serious Netflix of sports approach? We've been talking about this obviously for a long time. Interested to hear your thoughts on where this is going, and then I'd appreciate if Victor and Pedro, you could give your thoughts on that one as well.
It's a great question. I think there have been a few attempts at this already, and there are a couple of companies in question that are in the market for that, I'd say. I think it comes down to cost, actually, to be honest with you. I think there is an appetite for users to be able to consume an enormous amount of sport. Sky does it particularly well in the UK, or in different markets around the world, it's very different. Can you bundle all of that sport in one destination and make it and put a price tag against it that is the right price tag that means that consumers will pay for it and that means that business is profitable? So I'm asking you the question because I don't know the answer, because I don't think the unit economics work. That's my worry. And I think you're going to need multiple subscribers of content in what essentially we've got in this world today, where you subscribe to multiple platforms to get your fix. And I think that will have to continue, because otherwise I don't think the industry will be able to self-sustain. So my answer might be no. Sorry.
Okay, right, good. Victor?
My answer would be yes, but also to make this discussion a little bit more interesting, Otherwise we agree with each other all the time. My answer is a full yes. I think everyone is looking forward to it, to see on whatever device, on what moment in time you want to see a game that you want to see. Full stop. Problem is, and then I agree with you, who's going to pick up that bill? It's going to be a super publisher that needs to do it. So if I would bet, the Google, Facebook, Amazons of this world have the best cards, and you see them trying out brackets already with the NBA and stuff like that. But it is a time for disruption. So if users want it, then yeah, it's going to be complex. But at a certain moment, it's gonna go. Maybe the World Cup is, or the European League, or maybe you should start smaller ones instead of all clubs, all games played. But we've seen it happen in the US with college baseball or college baseball or basketball already. But yeah, that's an overseen amount of money. I don't know. This is just, is it 50 billion that's going around? Yeah, 500 billion. Yeah, well, let's see whose stock value is highest after this crisis to that can play the game.
Yeah, I think most was said, so I'll be really short. I think in this case, I agree more with Victor. I think yes, there's space. The only thing I want to add is it cannot be 100% like Netflix. I think it needs to be a mix between documentaries, movies, and live sports. And as you both said, it's a lot of money that needs to be involved there. It needs to involve the top premium contents of sports around the world, not only the top football leagues. So I think there's space, yes, but it needs to be an evolution of Netflix that combines a bit of on-demand documentaries and movies with live sports.
We do need a last dance also on football, right? Yeah. We need a last dance. Who's going to be the player? Maybe we can put it in a poll.
Growing up in Brazil, it has to be Pelé. I mean, it's not a question. What are you talking about? Well, look, gentlemen, it's always a pleasure having you guys on, and thank you for taking part. I honestly can't believe that's been an hour already. And before I hand over to David to wrap things up, the poor baby boomer, 0% of votes. There's no chance for them anymore. I'll tell my father he should just give up.
They have all the money already, so that's fine.
But 42% each to the millennial and Gen Z. So congratulations to the youth of today and youth of tomorrow. David.
Thank you very much indeed, Michael. Yeah, actually, just looking at that poll, people are still weighing in on it now, and it's now going into, well, it keeps moving up and down, but millennial now is having a little bit more purchase. I'd be really interested to hear what co-founder of Overtime, Dan Porter, who is known not to hold back in these kind of discussions, would say about that, because of course his business is very much focused on Gen Z, and it has a relation with both of these last two polls in terms of the generation to be focused on and the most important content creator, which went the way of the athlete. But of course, in terms of their way of looking at things, they look at college basketball and younger athletes to do this, the overtime symbol, and try and engage young audiences. And of course, we had that first poll as well, the COVID crisis. A lot of you saying, well, over 2/3, that it will increase the budget allocation for digital for your organization, which very much chimed with everyone here. Time for sports rights holders as well to embrace digitalization. We whizzed through so many things. You're right, Michael. How best to harness the power of data to exploit the appetite for football and how to monetize it. What return and guarantees big broadcasters expect when they spend big money on rights deals. So really the impact of COVID-19 going forward on a traditional topic. The juxtaposition syntactically of involvement and engagement, really nice distinction there from Michael. And also further on that, the other I word, influencers, and how the ecosystem of reach around an athlete will help determine the value of a player, and that, of course, includes influencers. It's been such a fascinating discussion. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Pedro, Victor, and Robbie, and thank you for handling it so brilliantly, Michael, as well. Really well delivered, almost as well as Joshua Kimmich's chip over the goalkeeper Roman Burki in the Classica just a few days ago. So thank you to those four. Really appreciate your company for us here today. Next Thursday, by the way, we are looking at the future of women's football and how the game will combat the challenges of COVID-19 to continue its upward trajectory after last year's extraordinary World Cup, in the company of another fantastic panel of experts. Do stay close to 11 Sports and World Football Summit's social channels for more details on that. So that is next Thursday. Hopefully we'll see you then. But for the moment, enjoy the rest of your week and your weekend. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.